This episode is dedicated to all of those base games that were shoved aside by expansions and won't have any quality alone time with you ever again. Welcome to Tabletop Shop.
Hello and welcome back to the Tabletop Shop podcast. This week, Meow, and also some games that you should never play without expansions. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nate Clark, and as always, seated halfway across the country from me is your other co-host, Mr. Cody Pennington.
I just want to say that this is some pretty tasty orange juice.
I just want to say that I felt like your intro before my intro kind of stole the thunder from my intro.
Well, that's what you get for trading the trees, man. Don't be chucking the cherries on me.
Just totally inorganically trying to work them in. Got it. Great. That's
We
what
gotta
we're
use
doing.
them, dude. We gotta use them. I don't remember any of yours, but I kept mine written down.
Flippin' discs. I remember that
Flippin'
one.
disc.
Yeah.
That's the best one.
It's the best one. Cody, question for you. What's most likely to attract you to a game? All right, now this is a multiple choice. Pick which best fits, okay? So,
So
Which-
there's not a correct answer, but it's just still multiple choice.
yeah, you'll pick which one aligns with your taste the most. So, which of
Okay.
which of the following three would attract you most to a game? An awesome theme, a trusted designer, or a favorite mechanism? And to muddle things a little bit more, let's say you have three different games, each that meets one of those criteria and does not meet the other two. So you have a game with an awesome theme, but you don't really like the designer, you don't really like the mechanisms. Or, you know, a game with mechanisms you absolutely love, but again, don't really like the designer, kind of meh on the theme. Which one is attracting you most?
So am I basically going into this blind? Like, do I not really know anything about the game other than designer, theme, and what was the last thing?
Mechanisms.
Mechanism?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd probably just have to play it safe and go with the designer. Because even if the theme is dope, there's plenty of games with great themes and they're terrible.
Absolutely.
And there's plenty of games that take a mechanism that I like and they just do a garbage job with it. But if I trust the designer, then whatever the theme or mechanism is, even if I'm not that interested in, I can assume that I'm probably going to enjoy the game. Or at least I'd have the best shot.
Your
at
best
enjoying
shot.
The game.
Kind of what I
Yeah.
figured you'd pick. What's a game, since
Okay.
you mentioned, what's a game that takes a mechanism you like and rakes it through the mud?
It rakes it through the mud. I guess Lords of Waterdeep? Because it's worker placement, but I'm just like...
But you don't dislike the worker
dumb.
placement part of that. You dislike the contract fulfillment part of that.
That's true. So it has to... Nate, this is such a hard question, man. Come up with easier questions next time. I don't know.
Well, one that does it for me is actually a game that I played this week. So
So you cheated. You experienced this firsthand, and you're ready for it.
yeah, we'll call it cheating. That's fine. Robot Quest Arena. Now, I mean, for starters, the name of this game is so doesn't really. It's a little incongruous with what you're actually doing in the game. It is like it's basically BattleBots, if you know what that is, but in a board game form. The quest part of the title, I don't know where that's coming from. Basically, it's a deck builder where you use the cards in your deck to manipulate your little robot in an arena and fight the other people in the game.
Okay.
The game, though, is so short. The game ended up being so short that I think I shuffled not even twice. I think I shuffled twice the whole game. So it wasn't even deck building, you know? It was like pretending to be deck building, but it's like, here's a card you're going to add to your hand and maybe you'll see it. It's the first card you bought.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you'll see it, you know? So
That's sad. I did come up with a better example for you,
Okay.
though. Tiny Epic Kingdoms. This is a 4X game. And granted, I haven't played very many 4X games at all, but I like the idea of it. It's basically taking a RTS
yeah.
PC game and sort of trying to implement it as a board game. And Tiny Epic Kingdoms was just terrible. I like that. They made so many Tiny Epic games. Like not all of them have to be winners, and honestly, probably most of them aren't winners necessarily. But Tiny Epic Kingdoms was just really boring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, there's always a risk of that with the Tiny Epic games because you are already the experience is not what it is with a big game already, right? And so you have to make up for that a little bit with the content, with the design, with the theme, whatever. And so,
Yeah.
it's already starting with a bit of a handicap, in my opinion. But some people like
And maybe
the
that's the
Tiny
problem
Epic
with.
deal. They like the tiny game. They like that a lot. So
I mean, it's a cool model. Like they keep churning them out. They just came out with Tiny Epic Game of Thrones.
yeah, right.
There was there was another one I just saw, but yeah, don't stop, keep going, Scott Alms.
I'm sure they will. I mean, they just will.
Hey, dude, what have you been playing this week?
Well, I played Robot Quest Arena.
Okay.
Would not
That was a real winner.
necessarily recommend. I think it might have just been about the scenario that we were kind of doing, the terrain that was out there that made it end faster. I guess I'd be willing to play it again, but it wasn't a great first game. Played Bad Company. This is I guess, space-based style game. I would say Machikoro style, but it's more like space-based. You have your set 2 through 12 characters. They're like members of your gang, I guess. And the theme is that you're trying to build like the biggest, baddest gang to just have the biggest, baddest gang. Like in theory, I guess you're robbing banks and stuff. And so it's got this, you roll dice on your turn and you get to use the dice and everybody else gets to use 2 of the dice and you're using them to trigger your characters. And then of course you can buy or you can obtain upgrades that make your different numbers, which are each a character, better. So it's very space-basy. Just with a different theme basically, and some contract fulfillment, but the theme is really not there at all, which I found strange. I thought this was going to be a really thematic game about like, oh, we're robbing banks. It's like, no, we're just tableau building and contract fulfillment, And so I was a little disappointed in that part of it. Overall, I'd say
Sad.
Space is still definitely the better experience when it comes to that kind of
Okay.
game. Played Stone Spine Architects. I've been calling this game Stone Spire since it was announced years ago. Or I think it was years ago. I swear it was called Stone Spire back then, and they just like changed it on me at one point.
Just switch the N on you.
When we broke the game out last night, we were, including the guy who owned it, we were all calling it Stone Spire, all of us. And he was like, "Oh wait, no, it's Stone Spine." And we all looked at the case. We're like, "Oh yeah, it is." Anyways,
Well, dang.
okay. This is actually, it's kind of in a way, contract fulfillment. Not really. It actually has a furnace cadence to it, where you're drafting Seven Wonders style, and when you draft a hand of 4 cards, then you lay out all 4 of those cards in a row, and you have kind of a blueprint that you're kind of trying to follow to complete some little goals, and then you can purchase some things, and then you do it again for your next row, and so you're going to do 4 rows that way. And so in a way, it feels kind of like Furnace, where there's a drafting phase, and then there's okay, take the cards you just drafted, put them into your playing area, and try to achieve some goals. With a very different theme from Furnace, but it surprised me. I was not expecting it, because I haven't played anything that really felt like Furnace. So that was interesting. The game itself was a little too simple. It's another game that's in the role-player universe, so that includes cartographers as well.
I was looking at the cover and it kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, the art in this one is a little bit lackluster in my opinion. I don't know if they used the same artist that they did for some of their other games, but it kind of came across as like a Clash of Clans kind of like just app, game art. It just, I don't know. It didn't look great in my opinion, but that's just me.
Okay.
Last but not least, played another Feld game. This is Bonfire. Had not heard of this one until we played it. And honestly, I'm not going to talk about it that much because it would be incredibly difficult to explain. It's the first time in a while I've played a game that I actually felt like had a new mechanism or two in it. And so that's why I'm just not even going to try to explain it, because it's just yeah, it's just crazy. And again, it's
Sounds
a Feld.
fun.
It's right. It's got a mishmash of a bunch of different stuff. It's basically also got contract fulfillment, and a weird action system that's kind of cool but also very frustrating, and then just more stuff that's just very, very. It took an entire game to figure out how to play it, and then we had to play it a second time. It was one of those games. So
Got it. So it's a game by a guy, has some stuff in it, and it takes a game to play.
yeah, so
Got
if that's not your speed, just stick to Robot Quest Arena, I guess.
Yeah, there you go, man. All right, that all you got?
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty good list right there. I've been playing 10% of nothing, aka nothing.
Which is still, let's see, I don't carry the
Still
zero. And
nothing.
Still nothing.
Carry the nothing. Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. I'm just my board gaming life has been very lacking lately, but it's also by choice.
Right.
So it's not exactly a frustration. It's just like I've been busy, man, working overtime at work. It's spring. There's yard work, but also the YouTube channel. A lot of time going into that. But here's the thing: with my recreation time, I am doing a fair amount of PC gaming.
Okay.
And so maybe in this section, I should just start talking about what computer games
Cody,
I've been playing
Cody,
lately.
Question of the week for you. You didn't like the question I gave
Yeah.
you, so new question. What PC games have you been playing this week?
Hey, thanks, man. I've been playing Blitzkrieg. Here's the thing. My YouTube channel is very World War II focused, and I just finished playing, like, completely annihilating, winning every mission in Stronghold Crusader, which is a game I grew up playing and I love. So I needed to switch to a different game, so I started playing Blitzkrieg. Nate, Blitzkrieg is unique in the RTS type game world because you don't have resources. You just have a mission you're supposed to complete, and you have some starting units, and then you have a little resource counter. So instead of having like little peasants or civilians going out trying to collect resources for you that you can then expand and build more stuff, you just have like maybe 5 reinforcement calls you can perform over the course of a game. And so you can spend that on, let's say, like 4 medium tanks, or like 5 or 6 light tanks, or an infantry division, or an airstrike. And so you really have to decide how to do your thing and what the needs of the mission are going to entail. But it's all super tactical. So like if you're driving around, you're selecting your little Sherman tanks to drive them around. It shows you exactly like what their armor rating is on the front and on the side and on top.
Wow.
And then for all the weaponry, it shows you like how many millimeters of armor like a given weapon will penetrate. So if you're going up against like a Tiger tank, you can't just send your Shermans in because their shells are just going to bounce off. So you actually have to get like more powerful weaponry, and it makes it. I'm not going to say it's like completely realistic, but I think they do a pretty good job of making it actual more interesting combat as opposed to like Age of Empires. You're just like, send in all these guys, hit.
Right.
Okay, they're dead.
Yeah. This is more Morrowind style compared to the Skyrim style. That's not what you're saying.
You failed casting the spell. Yep. So that's what I've been playing this week.
Well, as long as it's better than Blitzkrieg World War II in 20 minutes, then I approve.
Such a legendary game we had with that, dude. It was fun.
Never. It's like an experience that was so terrible. It's like I just never will play it again. I don't even want to try to come back and like have a better experience. It's just
if you had won, or let's even say let's say it swapped and you beat me by that same score range, would you feel differently about the game?
I would still have such a low opinion. I mean, I would feel better about that experience, but I would still have a low opinion of the game. I'd be like,
okay,
what kind of a game where I
gotcha.
could like just we both feel like we're making good decisions and one person just gets completely creamed.
Yeah. I mean that's how I felt with, was it Battlelore?
Yeah, right, Battlelore.
Right?
Well, Battlelore had dice-based combat, and there was no catch-up mechanism. There was no, it was just like a landslide.
Yeah, it's garbage.
Yeah, you also destroyed me in that. Should we talk about our game of the week?
We should talk about our game of the week. It's been too long.
How long? I mean, it's been a couple years since I've played this. How long has it been since you've played this game?
For me, at least a year. Maybe a couple years at this point. Year and a half. Yeah.
At what point do you look at a game on your shelf and be like, should I really have it still?
I mean, I feel like once a year I kind of end up going through an evaluation of like, you know what, I was saved that one for a while, but we just never play it, and I don't think I really even like it that much. I should just sell it. Except now I have a shelf of games that I've tried to sell multiple times. Like, no one wants to buy Last Will. What's with that?
Well, you got to stop trying to sell it for $60, Cody.
No, I'm not selling. I'm selling it for like 20, and no one wants to pick it up. I mean, it's rated super well on BGG. I feel like more people would want to jump on that. But
You would think so.
anyway, this isn't the Last Will / games you're trying to sell and take off your shelf podcast, Nate. This is the Isle of Cats episode.
The Isle of Cats.
And I
episode.
suppose, even though it's been like multiple years since you played it, and at least a year since I played it, I guess it falls to me to explain it. This is going to be interesting since this is so hazy for us now.
Well, I did watch a brief overview because it had been so long. I needed to refresh my memory a bit. So I did watch a brief
okay.
overview. You, sir, are still obligated, but I will
Of course.
pick up the
of
scraps and fill in the gaps.
I am curious, though. Cool phrase, by the way. Very, very niche. Yeah, don't be chucking the cherries, though. Have you played Isle of Cats multiple times or just once?
I have played it multiple times. Yes.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. So Isle of Cats is a polyomino drafting game where you play over a certain number of rounds. I think it's 4 or 5 rounds. And you are taking these polyomino cats, and very simple, you just have a boat that is a grid of squares that you're going to fit these polyomino cats onto. How you do all that and do everything in the game for the most part is there's also not just drafting of the kitties, but you're drafting a deck of cards. It's all mixed together, this one big deck of cards, but they all have different types of cards. So there's going to be cards that give you objectives for scoring. Some cards will give you like a number of baskets for a given round, which dictates how many cats you can draft for a given round. It will dictate turn order on those same types of cards. There's some that are just like random action cards that you play. And so every round you're doing this little take 7 cards, pick 2 of them to keep, pass them to the next person, and then you just kind of keep going on until you have your hand of cards. So that's really how the game is played, primarily through that function. And you get your cats and you put them on the board and you're trying to score really just off the objective cards. I think that's kind of the main way you really score.
But there aren't any, as far as I remember, there aren't any set objective cards. It's just as you go throughout the game and people are taking cards, they put out, you can choose to take and then put out public objective cards as you're drafting cards.
Or the personal objective cards.
Right, or personal ones, yeah.
But then, what is it now? I should have looked up an overview. You just watched it, but isn't there some sort of... No, never mind. Everything I'm thinking of is just in the objective cards. The only other thing, though, is the rats. If you leave rats uncovered on your boat, they're like -1 point each, I think.
It's true for real life, too. Can confirm.
It's true. Yeah, no one wants rats. Although apparently they're pretty friendly.
Okay. You and your rodent
I
obsession.
We just fed some blackberries to our gerbils today. It was pretty cute. 'Cause
Gerbils, plural?
Blackberries are... well, one blackberry per gerbil. But it's fun because blackberries technically are like a bunch of little tiny fruits
Sure.
together in one berry. And so the gerbils would just like rip off one at a time and eat them. Yeah.
What'd you like about this game, Cody? Not even going to try to segue from that.
Yep. I will tell you a couple things I liked about it, though. I came up with a good list of likes and dislikes. I like the puzzle of it, literally. I feel like I say this frequently about games, that I like that they are a puzzle, but this is literally like a polyomino puzzle, where you have your little boat grid pattern, and you're trying to fit everything on it, and you're trying to leave room and anticipate... I may get a cat in this shape later, or I'm going to get some of the little gold small pieces that kind of fill in the gaps, and you're just trying to make it all nice and pretty. It's fun. The game itself is, of course, a puzzle, because every game is a puzzle.
Playing off of that, I think the map in itself is actually very well done. It manages to achieve both a feeling of being restricted in where and what cats you place where, but also in feeling like there is so much room on the board still left to use, and you need to go like get those rats. But then how you place your cats is so important that you feel very restrictive constantly with the cats that you're placing. So I think it's a good balance, and it's pretty impressive that they managed to accomplish that, in my opinion.
Yeah, because there's basically multiple grid lines you're trying to work within too. You're trying to expand your kitties out to the other side of the boat so you can access different things. But then you're trying to fit them in, not just inside the boat, but inside the rooms themselves properly so you don't leave any blanks. Because again, those rooms, you lose points if you don't fill them.
And the rats, too. You're trying to catch the rats.
And the rats. Don't forget the rats. And the other stuff that scoring relates to. My next one, this is going to just be a mega point. I was trying to think through it, and it could sort of be divided into maybe like 2 smaller points, but I figured I would just talk about all of it. I like the drafting system for the cards, not the kittens. Actually, there's no kittens in this game, but there is an expansion that adds the kittens, just saying.
I love kittens.
Yeah, but I like that you go through sort of the 7 Wonders style drafting where you start with a certain number of cards, keep 2, pass the remaining to your left, and then you pick new cards from the new ones that you just received, and you go until you end up with 7 cards. But you aren't stuck with those cards. You then have to decide if you want to pay the cost. The resource is fish in this game. You have to pay fish for each card, and each card, depending on how strong it is, has a different cost. So I like that little double system where you're going through a standard drafting phase, but then you have to decide, will I play this at some point or not? And you have to make a decision right then and there. But then I like the fact, I was kind of explaining this in just the explanation of the game itself, but I like how all the drafted cards have different functions. So you're not just drafting, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a different...
7 Wonders?
Yeah, sure. But this, where all the cards have different places that they function. So if they're gonna be the lesson cards, or they're gonna be more special action cards, or they're gonna be
baskets.
Oh, that's right. There's the gold cards that like give you treasures, and those are cool. Yeah, the baskets and whatnot. So that's cool that those are all mixed together. So you really have to decide on a given turn, what are you going to focus more on? Like, I kind of already have some permanent baskets I have, so I'm going to focus less on the green cards, and maybe I'm going to go more, just start really pushing for the lessons or the objective cards to get points. So all that is a cool little system. It's fun to work with.
Those permanent baskets are a big deal. You want to get
They
those.
are a big deal. Those are hard to get to.
So similar point for me, I appreciate the fact that there are tons of different cards, basically. So pretty much the exact same thing that you said. The drafting part to me is kind of meh, whatever. You know, it's the basic kind of drafting, right?
Sure.
But yeah, you've got your lessons, and then you have public lessons and private lessons, right? So you have ones that if you choose that card, it's like, okay, this card is not just for me, but it's for everyone else, right? Similar to Arc Nova, where you have conservation projects that just come out of the deck. And it's like, well, if somebody chooses to sponsor that, everybody has a chance. You get the first chance, but everybody has a chance to go after it, right? But then there's private ones too, of course. You've got those special like wildcats as well as the treasures, and then you've got all of your baskets, and then special ability cards too. So tons of different cards in the game, which of course is necessary because it's half polyomino, half card game. So.
It's well balanced, though, too. I feel like card games can run into that sometimes, where if you have a bunch of cards or types of cards that have different important functions, you can get kind of overloaded in one sense, but they all seem to balance out pretty well.
Yeah, and then also like added in the fact that you're drafting it mitigates the like, oh, this hand has 5 basket cards in it. You know, I got pretty much screwed. I don't want that many baskets, right? But it's like, I know you pick 2, you pass, right? Which is such a great natural luck mitigation mechanism, I guess I would say. It's such an organic way of doing that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And even in a 2-player game where you're seeing less of those cards, obviously, it still pans out fine.
Yeah.
My final like is going to be the aesthetic and the colors of the game. It has a very satisfying tropical appearance. It has a good, like, rich tropical blues and reds and greens. All the cats themselves, of course, are very colorful, but the board, your personal board, your boat, has a nice appearance to it. It just looks nice.
Well, you took all my points.
I have a dislike mixed in there, so I'm going to say that later.
Okay. You took all of my points because my last one also is that it has a fun theme.
Yes.
Right? So I like the theme of, like, trying to get the cats off of the island. Are you trying to get them off, or are they, like, castaways? stowaways.
No, you're trying to get him off. There's some evil warlord named Vesh with, I'm sure, a very in-depth storyline behind him that doesn't matter for,
Cody, how do you remember
for what you're doing.
that the evil overlord's name is Vesh? How do you remember that?
I think I pulled it up on BGG the other day, so fight me.
What's the planet in Black Angel?
Spez.
I think that's where Vesh is from, actually, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Vesh from Spez. That's good.
Yeah, actually, the art is really well done as well. All of the cats. And there's a lot of art that's reused, but it's all a very unique style. I think it looks pretty decent, and it's just a fun theme. So,
yeah,
points for that.
Very true.
Cons.
How about some dislikes?
Yeah.
How about you start off with the dislikes,
I
so that
will.
way I don't steal all your dislikes.
I have such a petty one that I would love to start out with. I would love to lead off with this one.
Okay.
Okay. There's currency in the game. Do you remember what the currency in the game is?
Yeah, fish.
It's fish. Right. Okay, it's fish.
Fish.
Now, my first problem is that there's two denominations of fish. You have ones and you have fives. They're the same shape, the exact same size and shape, if I remember correctly, which is rather annoying because if there's different denominations of coin in a game, I would like there to be some kind of like physical shape-wise, some kind of difference, so that it's easier to tell apart, right? The other bigger, I would argue, problem is that on the one value fish, there's one fish printed, as you would expect, because it's one value. On the 5 value fish, somebody thought it was a good idea to print 3 fish, not 5, 3. I would love to know. I would love to hear the conversation that happened where that was decided to be the thing to do. Would it really have been so hard to put 5 fish on the token? First of all, make the token a little bigger, right? And then you have more space to print 5 fish instead of 3. But why would you put it's a 5 it's such a weird decision. It's such a petty thing. It's not a big deal. Once you just remember that one's 1 and 1 is 5, it's fine. But it's like, why though? It would just why?
I'm going to defend it a little bit. It's still bad, but I'm trying to find a picture of it, and I can't for some reason. But from what I remember, I think the one with 5 has 3 fish on top, but then 2 shaded fish that's like dark underneath, to where it looks like it's just the bottom of something. It doesn't look like it's 2 more fish that it's counting. I think all 5 are there technically.
Why are those 2 fish shaded out?
Because they're farther down. They're dark.
Disagree.
Oh, actually, I did find it. It does show all 5 fish, but it's like the 3 fish on top are very vivid blue, easy to see, and the 2 underneath are just like, what?
Whatever. Who knows,
yeah,
man? Who knows?
It is dumb. Sure, maybe that's a slightly petty point, but the petty points matter to us. And sometimes they can make or break the game. Let's just say that.
I mean, that one's not going to make or break the game. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe. Maybe if you're playing the whole game, like you're taking those as 5s and then you spend them like, oh, I only have 3 fish, and then you should have had a lot more fish. Like you could just lose because you're dumb.
I bet that's happened. I bet somebody, their first game of playing this, they missed that rule. They thought they were 3s, and they found out at the end of the game, and they were like, this stupid game, I'm never playing it again. Ruined my whole experience.
I kind of doubt that's happened, but maybe it has. Okay. All right. My first dislike is I kind of found the hack for the game. Some games can have hacks, and when you find the hack, it makes it a lot less fun. And the hack really is basically all the points come from those lesson cards, so you kind of just really go heavy on the lesson cards. Like you need to keep up a little bit of balance to make sure you're still getting cats and whatnot. But I feel like I tend to win with a pretty good lead at this game because midway through, like all I'll start taking really is lesson cards, and I'll just get a bunch of points off of it. And I want a challenge, man. I want a puzzle to solve.
Yeah, once you realize that's the thing
the
to do, then that's the thing to do.
It is. Kind of like Viscounts, where you just you load up the center with the workers.
Viscounts is exactly the same way. Like, we thought we were playing it wrong, and we checked the rules. And we were playing everything how we should, and we're just like, yep, that's the strategy to win Viscounts. Or to have a much better chance of winning Viscounts, I guess I should say.
Sure. I mean, if both players just go at it, then there you go. Now you've got a little bit of a different game going.
Well, that's the thing, but
But
then that's kind of stupid, right? Because it's like, well, when somebody goes for it, then at least one other person or multiple other people are obligated to all just kind of jump in. It's like, well, either nix it or we all do it, you know? And it's like, well,
yeah.
you know, not really making decisions in the game anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes away from the replayability because then every game is kind of the same.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Last one for me is a real con, which is
Okay.
that the gameplay feels a little disjointed. Both of the times or all of the times I've played this game, I've felt this way where it does not have a natural flow to the game. So you have 5 rounds, and within a round, first you draw cats, and so you put cats out on the board, and then you draft cards, and then there are some cards that you're allowed to play. And there's like 4 or 5 different types of cards. There's some cards that you're allowed to play. There's a phase where you can play some of them, and then there's the cat drafting phase, but then you can play other cards afterwards, and you weren't allowed to play those cards before the cat drafting phase. And it's just, there are logical reasons for why you play the cards when you play them and why the cat drafting is in between, but it really kind of it kind of stumbles the gameplay a little bit, I think. And it does not feel smooth, and it's always like, okay, what phase of the round? Okay, so which cards can I play? These ones? It's not intuitive, you know, it doesn't flow well.
it's kind of hard to track, too.
Yeah, yeah.
I am curious, do you feel the same way about Dinosaur Island?
No. Because
Okay.
Dinosaur Island is like, here's this board for this phase. So we're doing everything on that board. Now we move to this board. Now we move to this board. Now we move to your board. And then we do it again, right? So it's like, here's the 4 spots we move to throughout the game.
So it's not so much the very different phases, like one after the other. It's just the ability to track with that.
Yeah, it's hard to track. It's like I have a hand of cards and I have to try and remember which ones I'm allowed to play when, you know? Which if you play the game a couple times, then, you know, it becomes second nature, right? But, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of forgotten about that, but now that you say that, thinking back to some of the games I've played, and I feel like it is there's a bit of a challenge of trying to remember, like, wait, what do we do now? Then we do this next thing, and then even after you play through a couple rounds, you still have to keep referencing the rule book to remember what to do.
Yeah.
I have a final dislike and then sort of a neutral. My final dislike is that I think this could maybe be better as a faster experience, partially because of all those phases you're working through. It can be a little clunky. Overall, after you play the 4 or 5 rounds that you go through, it just feels kind of like a long game. Like you've already gotten the experience in a couple less rounds. I don't know if it would fix it to like just play 3 rounds. It would just be cooler if there was some sort of streamlined version of this. I know there's it's like a flip and right
Of course.
version of it, and I don't know. I've come to enjoy the blank and right game, so maybe it could be a good alternative. But
Did you have
that's how I
this
feel.
is something we were talking about in our game group recently about a prejudice against, you know, flip and right, roll and rights, whatever, if you haven't played one. Like for people who haven't played them, people who play board games but haven't played, an X and right game, I feel like there's a prejudice already towards them until you play one and you're like, oh, this is fun. But before you play one, you're like, really, we're drawing? You know, like I want to play a board game. I'm not a child, you know. But then you
Yeah.
finally play something, you know, like Cartographers or Three Sisters or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's still a full game.
Yeah, I think I kind of have. As I feel like I almost still do in a way, but I'm able to overlook that now and get like buy a new game. Like we got Three Sisters, and that was a roll and write, and I really like that game. But yeah, definitely in the early stages was like, it just feels tacky to like have
Yeah.
to take a pad of paper and like draw.
But
on
you
it.
were also in the camp of you don't like score pads for games as well, right?
I don't. No, I'd rather just have like a reference for it and then just use a calculator. Although I will say it's nice being able to pull out a game that's been a while since you played and you can look back through and see the scores. That is kind of nice.
Well, and it's nice to be able to look at your, like, after a game, or you can look at last time you played and you can see the breakdown of the scores. You're like, oh, this is what I did really
Yeah,
well on last time
true.
we played. This is what I did really poorly on. This person's won 3 times out of the 4 times they've played, and every time they invested in this. So, like, you know, so there's some analysis that can be done with it as well. But
Sure.
Isle of Cats does not have that, so I don't know what we're even talking about anymore.
Yeah, what? How do we get here, dude?
How do we get here, Cody?
Let me finish with my neutral point, which is that most of the cats just look weird. Like, I know they're going for sort of a fantastical approach, but like, one of the types of cats like have antlers, and then some of them have like vines of like green gems coming out of it. It just looks weird, dude.
There's definitely a
It's
fantasy twist to it. I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
Vesh is canon, so, a cat with antlers, kind of not that weird. But
I don't know. Yeah, it's a little not quite on the disturbing
Sure.
side, but a little bit close.
a little
you
bit
know?
weird. It's a
So-
little weird. Overall, if you like polyominoes and you like the theme, I think those two reasons alone are good enough to pursue this game. If you're kind of neutral on the theme or on the polyomino aspect, probably stay away from it, would be where I would land on it.
If you're more of a dog person, you need a different game.
Yeah, maybe Dog Park.
Is that a game?
It's a game, man. Came out like last year or
There's a-
something.
There's not Isle of Dogs.
Isn't that a...
It just sounds dumb.
That's a movie by,
Really?
what's his face? The guy that did Grand Budapest Hotel. I can't grab his name right now. That guy. He did
It is a
Fantastic
movie.
Mr. Fox. He did a song called, he did a movie called Isle of Dogs.
2018. This looks like a.
It's like a claymation. I think.
Is this? It looks like I almost said animatronics. So yeah, stop motion or something. That looks disturbing.
Okay. Anyways, wait. What's the director's name? Just for our listeners and for me.
I just closed.
Come on, Cody. Gosh dang it.
Isle of Dogs. Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson. That's correct. Okay. Moving on. Now I can sleep. Let's get onto our list, Cody.
All right. And game of the week. Or the top 3 games of the week that we'll only play with expansions.
Are you going to play any of these games this week?
I'm not going to play any games this week, probably.
Okay. We'll just move on from that heresy.
Yeah, nice try.
Our top 3 games that we will not play without expansions. Will we have crossover?
Or that we'll only play with expansions.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Was there a difference? There's no difference, right?
No, there's not.
Will we have any crossover?
I certainly think we will have crossover.
I know what you're thinking, and I'm going to tell you right now you're wrong, and I don't think we'll have any crossover. We might have one.
Really?
We might have one.
Really? That's interesting.
Let me start
very
off.
interesting.
Let me start off with an honorable mention because there's a game that should have made the list, but I felt like I couldn't put it on the list, which is Settlers of Catan. Settlers of Catan is a very hard game to stomach if you've played with Seafarers and or Cities and Knights. To go back to base Catan is to strip away a lot of the game. Seafarers adds in a ton of variety and adds in ships and makes the board way more interesting. Cities and Knights basically doubles the complexity of the game with everything it adds in. So if you take either one of those away, it feels like you're really taking part of the game away. And so if you go back to base Catan, it's really, really a disappointing experience compared to with both of those expansions. The reason it has to be an honorable mention is that over the past year, I actually played it quite a few times without the expansions, just due to the fact that we were traveling and we ended up in places with Catan there. And so we just played it. But
Okay.
it's my honorable mention.
All right. Well, maybe before you hit your number 3, I should give my honorable mention.
Ooh, okay.
Then I actually have 3 honorable mentions in order as well. I just took 6 games, then decided which 3 would be the top 3.
So you just have your 3 runner-ups. You're just going to go through them.
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
Do you want to know?
Sure.
Although maybe I shouldn't give you all of them because then that might help you figure out what my top 3 are. I'll just give you number 4.
Okay. Number 4.
Quacks of Quedlinburg.
Huh.
And Quacks, yeah, maybe this is a bit of a surprise. Just have one expansion for it. That's the Herb Witches. But it really helps. And the reason this didn't make the top 3 is because one of the things Herb Witches adds is other ingredient books that you can play with. But you don't necessarily want to play with that ingredient set all the time. You can play with the original set. But Herb Witches also adds the herb witches and the little coin things that you can spend for the silver coin, the gold coin, and the bronze coin. You can spend each of them once per game to do a special ability. that really adds a lot to the game. It's gives you more things to think about, makes it more fun, lets you get higher scores. But it just didn't quite make the list because I would still be fine playing the base game, and there's plenty of other ingredient lists to go through.
And that's exactly why I would not put this on my list either, which is that the base game of Quacks is still a blast. I mean, it is a blast. You can take that expansion out, and you're still having a lot of fun with Quacks. So,
with that sentiment, you might guffaw at my number one.
At your number one.
My number one, which is... I'm just kidding.
Alrighty, Cody. My number 3 is a game that I have disparaged more on this podcast than probably any other game. Nidavellir is a game that I would not ever play again without the expansions. I think the expansions take Nidavellir from a basic, rather boring game to halfway decent, has some interesting aspects to it, would play again. The base game is just basic drafting, basic scoring, basic everything else. Other than luck, has a cool vibe-ish. But the expansions, I can't really differentiate the expansions because I played them both at the same time the first time. But they add in a lot of different stuff that definitely makes the game more interesting. So.
Nidavellir was actually my second runner-up, my number 5.
Sniped one of them.
So yeah, it's that low because I still would play it without the expansions.
And,
just the expansions make it so much better.
And you continue to be wrong.
This is an opinion podcast, Nate. Fight me.
This isn't an opinion podcast, Cody. It's a top 3 games we won't play without expansions podcast. So, in your opinion, what's your number 3?
Huh? Okay, my number 3 is Viticulture. Because when you be playing with the Tuscany expansion and you go back to base Viticulture, you're like, what is this? What is this garbage? And Nate, surely this has to be on your list because you couldn't even remember the difference, like a Viticulture before Tuscany. Like we had this conversation in a previous podcast, and you were, I feel like you were listing off all these things that you thought was.
That was actually a very, very funny podcast because. Yeah, genuinely could not differentiate in my memory between the two.
And then when you figured out what the base game was, you're like, "Oh, that's a garbage."
Did I say that? I might have actually said that. It's not on my list for one reason, which is that although Tuscany does make viticulture a lot better, I don't see it as... I see myself in the future buying viticulture and then at some point afterwards buying Tuscany. It's been so long since I've played viticulture that I would be perfectly fine with a good 3 to 5 games of base viticulture before I threw Tuscany back in again.
Really?
Yeah. So.
And then a couple years after the fact, you won't be able to differentiate, and then you'll be like, "Oh, that was
Cody,
base viticulture."
If I buy viticulture, there will be no couple years after the fact because if I go 2 years without playing a game, I'll probably get rid of it. So. Looking at you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, fight me.
Was that was your number?
I'm a busy man, okay?
Okay. My number 2 is something that was talked about relatively recently. This is Bang the Dice game. This game I played back-to-back, once base game, once with the Undead or Alive expansion. Base game is very... obviously, both of them are very luck-based. It's just about rolling dice, basically. It's a social deduction game. But the expansion added in some more kind of special abilities, and it added in some different player interaction as well. Not to mention the fact, just the slightest chance of their possibility of being any players that have been eliminated from the game, as it's a social deduction game. Any players who have been eliminated actually have a chance of coming back as a zombie army, which then everybody else has to fight against. So just the idea of that is amazing too. But the base game was very point and shoot. It was very basic, chuck some dice, here's the obvious choices, and blah, blah, blah. Expansion made it way more fun.
Have I played Bang the Dice game?
You've played Bang the card game.
Okay.
Which holds up without any expansions.
And I barely even remember that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to take your word for everything you just said.
As you should.
Because this podcast, Nate, it's built on trust. Do you realize that?
And opinions.
and opinions and trusted opinions.
And my opinion is that I don't always trust you.
Oh man, it's just it all falls apart. We need to reevaluate. With my number 2, Champions of Midgard,
Champions of Midgard.
which I'm assuming this is not on your list, since I think that's the one that you thought that I would have been thinking of, that you then said, no, it's not on the list.
Well, why is it on your list?
Because you have to have the Valhalla expansion, man. It changes so much with being able to get a benefit for losing your dice so that you actually have some incentive to try to use them. And I'm realizing as I'm looking through my own list, I'm not sure if I approached like the actual specifics the same way that you did, because these games I would still play the base game. It's just if I possess the expansions, I would never not play with the expansions. Maybe that's a little bit more how I approach it.
I think I still agree with that.
Yeah.
With that statement.
Okay.
Because, so you're right, Champions of Midgard did not make my list. Ironically,
Uh-huh.
when we mention a list like this, it was the first thing that popped into my head, right? Because it's kind of like Valhalla is a necessary expansion. And I actually agree. It is a necessary expansion. However, it's my opinion that Champions of Midgard with Valhalla, as well as Dark Mountains thrown in, is too much for somebody who hasn't played it before. Unless it's somebody who has played a lot of games, I feel like throwing somebody in with both of those is really a lot. And I think taking Valhalla out for somebody's first experience is actually a better way for them to play the game the first time.
So you would play it by default. So your list specifics has a caveat of if there's a new player involved.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, I mean, the list is games I won't play without expansions. But the fact of the matter is that if I want to teach somebody Champions of Midgard, and I think that maybe they couldn't handle it with the expansion, I'm not going to say, well, let's just not play it because I won't play it without the expansion. I'll be like, oh, that's fine. We'll leave Valhalla out and just play it with maybe it's just Dark Mountains.
I think, Nate, that you're overthinking this and that you're throwing too many specifics in there, because I'm sure that there would be a scenario of some kind that I would be willing to play any game with someone, in which case I would have a top 0 for this.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, you can always put yourself in the situation like if I was locked in a cabin in the woods with one other person and it was just this base game and Valhalla was nowhere to be seen. Yeah, I guess I'd play it.
Well, you see, Cody, even though I would never not play this without the Valhalla expansion, like, what if little Timmy down the street happened to want to learn how to play a board game, and the only one he was interested in playing was Champions of Midgard, but I felt like Valhalla was too expansion of him for him.
The part of the reason I'm thinking of this is because actually when I taught it to Anna, I decided to leave Valhalla out. So this isn't like a hypothetical scenario. This is actually something I've done. And so I felt like staying true to the definition of the list. This is a game that I chose to play without the expansion recently.
So another caveat.
Whose turn is it? Is it my turn? My number 1? Is that we up to my number 1 already?
I've given 2. Have you given 2?
I've given 2.
All right, give me your number 1.
My number 1 is a game that hasn't been talked about in a while. This is a game that I genuinely, absolutely would not ever touch it again without the expansion. This is Civilization: A New Dawn. Never got a lot of love. I'm sure there were good reasons for that. One of them is that the game was a little bit broken, especially the combat system was way too easy for somebody to get way overpowered compared to the other players in the game. The expansion, in addition to adding a bunch of very cool content, also included a fix for that combat system. And in that, instead of in the base game, you could just attack anybody that was within a certain range. And then you could get a card later in the game that would literally let you attack any single space on the board, regardless of your position to that. The expansion included in 2 actual army units that were your units that you would move around and you could fight with. It made the game much, much better and even more thematic. So,
but now let me give you a caveat.
Yeah, okay, we'll go for it, Cody.
What's your caveat? Situation.
What's your caveat?
It's a stormy night. Let's say it's a Friday evening. You're kind of settled down at home. Okay. You and Anna are just kicking back.
Sure.
It's like it's a nice evening.
Do I have my slippers on?
You have one slipper on.
Okay.
I think maybe you just threw your left slipper. Let's say you have a new cat or something, and he was being a jerk, and so you just threw it at him. Okay,
Checks out.
that's what's
Okay.
going on here. You hear a knock at the door. It's a little bit hard to discern at first because there's actually thunder going outside and disguises the sound for a moment. And so, but you realize that there's probably someone there. So you go over and you open the door because I'm assuming you don't have a little like keyhole or eye hole thing. But even let's say you do. You look through, you don't see anything. You open the door anyway, and slumped there at the bottom of the door, Nate, is a man. He's drenched in rain. He's bleeding. He has a gunshot wound. It's hard to tell if it's self-inflicted or not. Maybe he got in a fight like down the road.
Self-inflicted gunshot wound that didn't kill him?
Yeah. Well, maybe it was an ND. It was a negligent discharge. Okay. Sure. But he looks up at you, and he gasps and he coughs and he sputters and he tries to say something and then changes his mind and he says nothing. And you're like, sir, is everything okay?
At this point, I don't think I want to play a game.
Is there anything I can do for you,
I don't think I want to
sir?
play a game at all the rest of the night.
No. And you say, is there anything I can do for you? And he says, I think I'm too far gone at this point, so you can't save me. But there is one thing you can do for me. I just want to play one last time Civilization: A New Dawn, the base game, but without the expansion. You see, I'm James Niffen, and I designed this game. And I just want to experience it the way I used to before the expansion came out. So in that scenario, would you play it?
No, I'd take him to a hospital. Absolutely not. It wouldn't even. You just put me in a situation where the last thing on my mind is like, let's play a board game.
But it's his dying wish, dude. Okay, let me give you an alternate scenario. You're an evil Bond mastermind has taken you captive. He's holding a gun to your head. Says, if you do not play Civilization: A New Dawn, the base game, with no expansion, I will kill you.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay. All
All
right.
right, what's your number one, Cody?
So your list is kaput. It's whack. It doesn't count.
Completely invalidated. You got me, Cody.
Yeah. And because of that, I will now give a far superior number one, which you may be surprised. Like I said, you may guffaw. This is a Stonemaier game. Probably not the Stonemaier game you're thinking of, that you're first thinking of. This is Tapestry. Because with the advent of Board Game Arena and the ability to easily play the solo mode of Tapestry, I've been playing a lot of Tapestry, except obviously not for the past couple of weeks since I haven't listed any games that I've been playing. But for a while there, I was playing a lot of Tapestry games. And they have some parts of an expansion in there that you can play with, but not like the full components. And I, in my actual physical possession, have all the expansions for Tapestry. And I played it with Kirsten like a couple weeks ago or something, and it's the difference is dramatic. Like having that fifth board, the arts board, whatever the pink one is. And then you have the little personal building that once you satisfy a requirement, you can build that building in your little civilization grid. And all the different Tapestry cards, all the different, not event cards, the technology cards, all those things. It all gathers together to make just a truly glorious experience. And so my justification is I would never find myself just playing the base game of Tapestry as long as I have the expansions in the board game room. It's just not worth it. It's like you can get a higher score, and I'm all about getting the best score possible. You know what I'm saying? I like having a record. And my record is 399. Dang it. I want to get over 400.
399.
So I need the expansions, man.
How many times did you recount to make sure that you didn't, have an extra point hiding somewhere?
Oh, well, it's impossible to like really recount though, because you earn these points throughout the game.
But I mean, your last income turn, there's a lot of points.
Oh, sure. I think I did check it for sure that time.
Well, I'm not going to knock you on this pick. I mean, I didn't even consider it for my list. But I can see. I think Arts and Architecture is a fantastic expansion. I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's very good. So
Fantasies and Futures also helps a lot because it adds not only more civilizations you can play as, but it adds different city mats that you can play with that have. They're not just different layouts; they actually have special abilities attached to them.
Well, I believe
so
Arts
and
and
gives
Architecture
you a different mini game.
does that as well, or Plans Employs. Because I have like 5 or 6 other maps that have special abilities on
Yeah,
them.
you might be right. I think I'm just, since I have all of them, they kind of blend
Sure.
together. But
Yeah. So that's our list. That's our list. Do you have another honorable mention that wasn't named, Cody?
my number 6, Castles of Burgundy, and the reason this one was so
Ooh.
low is because if you just get the anniversary edition, it comes with the expansions. You
Huh.
can't really find them separately, or at least in print anymore.
Well, you
So it's
can.
sort of a weird toss-up one.
You
you
can,
can?
if you have base Castles of Burgundy, that like whatever it is, 8 or 10 mini expansions that come with the anniversary edition, you can buy all of
Yeah.
those individually for the base game. I believe all of them.
Well, I know you could, but I assumed at this point that they were all, like, since the anniversary edition exists, I would assume that they're not in print anymore.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
But
the base
maybe
game
not.
is still in print, so I don't
Is
know.
it?
Yeah, I think so.
Why would you buy the base game?
'Cause it's way cheaper.
That's garbage. There's like the anniversary edition that's out now.
The anniversary edition is only for the richest of the rich, Cody. So that's actually a very good point, and I didn't even consider Castles of Burgundy because I forget that those are expansions. That the first time I played the game
Yeah.
was with that anniversary edition, and I didn't know that they were mini expansions, so we put everything in from the beginning. And that's the way I've always played the
That's
game.
a lot.
So I didn't even know that they were expansions for the longest time. So
And you were playing half of those rules wrong anyway, so
yeah, we do not need to
changes
rehash
things.
that conversation. I'll be very embarrassed.
Nate, remember,
Ah.
if you went blind from watching the eclipse, at least you can still listen to this podcast.
So, I mean, by the time this comes out, the eclipse is old news. But do you think anybody went blind? Nobody went blind.
I don't know. I don't know. Here, I'll Google it for you. It's not talking about the most recent one, but saying during a 1991 eclipse that was watched by over 50 million people in Mexico, there were only 21 moderate cases of eclipse-related visual impairment recorded. Wow, that's tiny.
Eclipse-related visual impairment.
Yeah,
Say that 5
that's a
times
real
fast.
phrase.
Is this our outro, or are we going to do an outro?
I figure you just cut somewhere in there. Unless
Our
Unless we
outro
need
is
to
not
do
an
a new
outro anymore.
outro.
We're just, like, still chatting.
just leave this in as an extended one.
Sounds good.